friends. Welcome back to the Rachel LaForce Show. That's right, it's me, Rachel LaForce, and this is my show. I'm so excited. You guys, it's been a minute since we've had a guest, and today I'm going to do my best to not just tell you everything about him. I want him to tell you some things. I'm so excited. This is author? Oh my goodness. Author, magician, performer. There it is. Please welcome to the show, Nick Paul.
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy. I'm glad we were able to make this work. This is gonna be fun.
This is so exciting. Okay, so I've just got to tell everybody how we know each other. We're going to start there. Okay, so we went to Columbia College.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we met, right?
Yeah, I think I've known you longer than I've known my wife.
Oh,
I've
that's
known my wife
probably
a long time.
That's probably true. When did you and Kristen meet?
2008, and I think you and I started doing improvs in 2005, maybe.
Oh my gosh, that's so yeah.
I know.
What was our? So you did the improv team at Columbia, right?
Yeah, I think I tried taking it because you were on. There was two things. There was the actual team, and then there was just the fun workout group. They didn't want to tell us we weren't good enough to be on, and I was in that group for a year or two, and rightfully so. I was awful. And then you were on with a whole bunch of very talented people, and then eventually I think we all got on the team, and it was.
Was it Drop-In Science?
Drop-In Science was the name.
Drop-In Science. I haven't thought about that in so long.
It's weird how you those are those things. It seems like kind of high school theater too. Those things that really define your persona, and then you forget about them, and you hit your late 20s and your 30s, and you're like, I need to be an adult now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a blast, and you were always so kind and so fun to perform with, and I always had a tough time not breaking being in scenes with you because you're always so funny.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. And then we went to. Were you in conservatory at Second City with Casey?
No, you guys were.
I pulled you in from Drop-In Science. Is that how you joined Wildcard?
Yeah, that was it. Okay. Because we were never in the same Second City Conservatory group or comedy studies group. We were all kind of a couple years off. But I got a call from you and Casey, and then it's funny, you forgot about Drop-In Science. I literally forgot about Wildcard.
Oh, really?
I didn't forget about it, but it's just one of those things that you know someone for so long, you're like, oh yeah, we did that thing. Oh, we did that thing too.
Yeah, we did that thing for quite a while.
Yeah, and then I was so bummed because I had to leave. I moved down to Orlando with Kristen, and you don't know how depressing it is to go from Chicago improv to Orlando improv. And I'm not crapping on any of the people that perform there because they were all very funny and great and really great with games and stuff I'm terrible at. But I just remember being instantly a terrible improviser again because I couldn't trust the people I was on stage with, and they didn't trust me because they're like, who's this guy? Yeah. And I got so depressed. I really missed it.
I forgot that you guys moved to Florida. Okay, so I know everybody that's listening, and they're like, "What is happening?" It feels like it's
we're just gonna reminisce. People are like, "Who the hell?"
Why comedy Da Vinci Code for an hour. But I think it's important, and so skip ahead if you don't like old friends catching up. What are you, a monster? Okay, so we did. Well, and the reason why I think it's important to go back and talk about it though too is to your point where it's they were such defining moments and who we are as performers, because we had done that together, and then you guys were in Florida, I was in Chicago, then I don't know, 7 more years or something, but you and Kristen and I all moved to LA around the same time.
Yeah, knowing people like you and having other friends from Columbia really made it an easier process. I think we went there in 2015, and I had no friends in Orlando, and I was just I don't know anybody. Then we looked, and everybody's in LA, and Kristen really wanted to go to LA, and it made just having a group of people, even if you don't see them that much, makes such the difference in terms of not being lonely. And it's I have such compassion for people who are lonely who don't have friends, because it's I experienced that for 4 years in Orlando, and it sucked. I knew people, but you didn't really hang out with them in the same way you would in Chicago in college or You know, just the way here where everybody's kind of somewhat doing the same thing, even if it's not, you know, you're all in kind of the same boat together here in LA, which is, I think LA gets a lot of crap, but I think that's one of the good things about LA is everybody is just trying to work and make it work.
Okay, I completely agree because I mean, I left LA for like a myriad of other reasons, but I will always say that it's like LA has great people. And I think that was one of like the biggest misconceptions I remember where before moving and everyone's like, "Oh my god, LA, everyone's like so
Mhm.
fake. Everyone's so fake in LA." I'm like, "I don't know. I feel like I met people that like are sacrificing so many things to do what they love to do.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of other places where it's like, oh, everybody's in this together, even if seemingly like competing or like what, like there is this sense of like, all right, I see your hustle, you know?
Yeah.
And I always really appreciated that.
Kristen like found a really funny quote on Overheard LA. I think I'm butchering it, and it's of course it's a bit pretentious and very LA, but at the same time very true. It's like it's something along the lines of course everybody in LA is stuck up. It's a whole city of people that were too good for their hometowns. You know?
That's hilarious. Yeah.
It's awful, but it's kind of true.
Well, and it's also, I remember like when I first moved there, how I could feel how different LA was from everywhere else, but then how quickly just as humans we like adapt. So then everything does become like normal. And then being out of it again now for a year, I'm like, oh yeah, LA is wild. Like, I mean, I love it. It wasn't for me. I didn't want to live there anymore, but like, I I found I actually not day to day because my life has just changed a lot, but I do miss more things than I thought I would. But also sometimes it's more of like reminiscing for like when we used to go into audition rooms and audition, like we don't really do that anymore, and like just all of the things. So I remember I want to talk about magic and your trajectory and everything that you're doing. So
Can I just really quick before I forget this story because you mentioned Wildcard and like
yes.
so much shameless promotion of the book is just weird, absurd stories that have happened to me over the past 20 years. And one I forgot, I'm so mad I forgot to put in the book. It was when we were performing. It was like you, me, Brandon, and I forget who else was there in like the back of some like country club or something. And like they
Yes.
literally poured money on us. Do you remember?
Yes. Yes. It was you, me, Brandon, and Greg.
Yes.
It was just the four of us because I still have a picture. It's one of my favorites. And Greg and I were going to a Cubs game after the event. And so I had a Cubs shirt on and you and I are sitting on the lip of the stage and you had my sunglasses on and we're just like back to back holding up the dollar bills that they threw at
Mhm.
us.
It's one of those funny defining moments of like, well, it's got to get better, right? Like it's only up from here.
Well, okay. So as we pause on that, first of all, one would hope. And then it also cracks me up now with like kind of being in a new pond all over again here in Atlanta and like trying to strategize and figure out like what do I want to do? Where do I want to perform? Like how do I want to do it this time around? And kind of like that reinvention of being a performer all over again and like doing it at 37. So that's why this was just so special to like reconnect with you where it's like, oh yeah, this is the thing I've been doing for so long. And like, I used to just do it because I loved it. And yeah, like you hope the gigs got better or you hope this or you hope that, but like you just did it because you love it. And then once like the gigs do get better and you get better as a performer and all those things. And now in many ways, I feel like I'm starting again, but starting with like all of these years of experience. Um, and so that's just interesting because my husband and I are opening up a physical brick and mortar production studio
Oh, cool.
here in Atlanta, and we're gonna do a bunch of shows out of it. So anyway, some of the places that we've been looking at, and he's like, I don't know how we'd convert this space. I was like, listen, I've done comedy in a lot of places. We'll figure it out. Okay, so you wrote this amazing book all about. So tell us more about it. And I didn't even realize till I was looking at it recently that yeah, it's all these short stories of your experiences. Now, are they specifically to being on the road or tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's like everything from cruise ships to like the first time I was on stage at elementary school. It's all like really short, bite-sized things. A, because I'm lazy and I hit 20,000 words and I'm like, I'm done. I worked on this for 2 years. I can't keep going. And also like, that's like the best compliment I keep getting is like, people are like, oh, it's a really quick, fun read. You know, only takes like an hour or two to get through it. And as I say on, in my show, if you don't like to read, I'll read it to you on Audible.
Nice.
But yeah, it's just a bunch of funny short stories. It was, you know, I do a lot of cruise ships and you have a lot of downtime on cruise ships and you're just like, I need to be writing. And
Mm,
I've got, my wife is a fantastic writer and I've had friends that have encouraged me. And, you know, like you're just figuring it out. That's the kind of the one thing you realize once you hit your 30s, like, oh, everybody's just figuring it out. And then, you know, I took a couple master classes on writing, and then, you know, you went to high school, you did the AP English and things like that. So you're like, I have some foundation of, I know basic grammar. But now it's like, it's so stupid easy to write because of Grammarly and
yeah.
having, you know, an editor or something that will help go, oh, change this or do this. And it's, but yeah, it's a bunch of funny short stories called Magically Introverted. Okay, that's my pitch.
No, I love it. I'm gonna pitch this forever. We're never gonna stop. Okay, so then we're gonna come back to the book, but I want to go. So I think I saw Kristen, your wife, more in LA than I saw you through sketch comedy and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that. I coached her team for a small amount of time when they were like in between coaches. And so I've seen like her growth and development as a performer as well. And so when you and I were doing comedy and stuff together, it was all improv, because one of the most core memories for me when we were doing Wild Card was there was one show that we did in the back of like a brewery in on Division Street, and you just played all of the inanimate objects.
Oh, that was a fun show. That partially came from me always feeling inadequate as an improviser and just being surrounded by you, Greg, Joey, all these people. Like, I thought you guys were always fantastic, and I'm just like, I'm not going to talk this whole show. And I think it was one of our best shows.
I remember it being one of those where I was like, not in a self-masturbatory way, but like a, wow, I'm actually like really good at this. Like, I think the excitement of being like, there's something I'm actually adept at doing. Cause sometimes I think in our early 20s, it's like, well, I know I want to do these things or this or that, but like the world just feels so overwhelming. And I remember doing that with Wild Card, and also just how special it is to create with other people. Like I found myself like actually really missing improv, not enough to like be on a regular improv team, but
I know you do reach that level of like, once you hit 30, you're like, I can't.
yeah, I'm like,
I want to sit on the couch.
yeah, I'm like, I got 2 kids. I can't be out doing like, you know, a midnight show. I have done a few though here at Dad's Garage, and it's pretty fun. But so that's when I remember like you were doing magic then, because you've done magic seemingly your whole life, right? To some degree.
Yeah, I started as a young child and started doing it more in high school, and then college was doing it, you know, like birthday parties and stuff to pay the bills. And then I just kind of kept doing it because I just looked at, I'm such a weird financial person. Like, I'm interested in personal finance, and like I just did the math of like, well, I can make this much money as a magician, or I can make no money as an actor.
Yep.
You know, it's just, I kind of always kept looking at it that way. But um yeah, it was like those shows. I think what's funny about that show is it really informed my silent character, kind of gave me the confidence, because then after that I created just like a completely silent show, and I did that for a while, but now it's a mix of both because I miss the improv element of being able to interact. The audience is now kind of my improv partner. So
Yeah.
the problem with doing a silent show, which is great because you can get every beat so like precise and perfect, but then the show becomes identical every single time. And
Mm.
I just got, for the millionth, there's a story in the book about auditioning for Blue Man and failing. And I literally 2 weeks ago, I got out of nowhere, it fell on my lap. I did a last minute audition for them, and I got a call back. And it was funny. It was like, cool, great. Yeah, okay, this is the thing I wanted to do 15 years ago. Awesome. And then you get the call back and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Yeah.
So, and I ended up not, you know, going to train or anything like that, but it was a weird relief, because it's funny, the things that you're interested in your 20s that you think are going to define you, and then you keep going, you're like, I need to do that at all. I can be myself. I can be more confident in myself. It's just
Oh, I
I'm like,
love that. I love that so much. I do. That warms my heart so much, because I feel I think it makes me feel less alone, to be perfectly honest, because like my dreams have shifted in what I want to do. And there's still sometimes or like, sometimes I'll do what I'm doing or even like record this podcast sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really doing it. Like, this is what I want to be doing. And then there's other times where I will see examples of things that I used to really want to do. And I'm like, maybe I've just kid myself. Like maybe that was the thing that I really wanted to do. But I think that's so cool. Yeah. Where it just proved to you, we're like, well, I already did a silent show and I've now moved on from that. Cause that was, so I came to see your show. You were doing Hollywood Fringe Fest and you did your silent show. And I remember afterward, you either, and correct me how the story really went, but either your grandfather was still living or he had just passed. And you gave this beautiful speech. I don't know if you remember this. It was very significant to me about how important he was and kind of helping to define your journey of being on stage and incorporating magic and kind of getting to this place as a performer that you, where you were at the time. Does any of that ring a bell?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of that in the show now where I do this big prediction routine inspired by my grandpa Tom, who passed away like the day after my parents' wedding.
Oh,
And
wow.
I never got to meet him, but so it's just I do a bit now where I'm just like trying to I have a memorize a deck of cards with all different names on them, and I try to figure out the name of the card they chose the whole show. And at the very end, there's a kicker, and it's you find it. So it's like connecting with memory and how I feel like we don't remember anything anymore. But if you don't forget people, they're never really gone, and that type of emotional connection. So I've been trying to add more and more things like that into the show because the rest is so absurd and silly and weird. But I'm trying to like lately I've been working with a writing partner and just trying to find those like in between moments in the show. It's like, okay, I know this works, but it's like, okay, this part's not working. And then trying to almost treat it like a Scrubs episode or something where
Yeah.
you can be really silly and weird, but at the end you get hit with something emotional and not like in a overly presentive way or an overly, hey, look at me, look at my life kind of way, but just hopefully more of a universal way that people can connect to. So that's been kind of fun to play with lately, and just to not be afraid to get a little bit more emotional in the show. Because I think, I had a friend say to me, actually, I think maybe it was like, no, it wasn't a friend. It was Mike Birbiglia, who's a comedian I love. And he's like, don't be afraid to
Love
use
Mike.
more heart. You can always add
Mm.
more heart into the show. And I think that's true. So I think maybe what you're talking about is probably the beginnings of that. And when I kind of
Okay.
started finding those little nuggets.
Well, I love that so much because, I mean, I always go back and forth, right? Because I feel like my work has shifted a lot in that way of like, especially like my stand up, where I think for a long time I didn't, when I started to make this shift as an actor or like as an artist and a performer. And I'm like, well, it's not comedy then if you're not just going for the joke. And
Mhm.
then it was like, actually, Mike Birbiglia is one of my favorites who I feel like does that very well, which I'm like, if you still look at laughs per minute, he's still getting a lot of laughs, but he's also allowing himself to be as smart as he is on stage.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Like, I feel like sometimes, like, I feel like when I was in this place of just wanting to go for the joke because I wanted you to know how funny I am, but it was like, well, I only want you to see me as funny because then you won't see other things about Rachel. Like, I
Sure.
actually had to be vulnerable to be like, oh, there's a lot more here. I've just created an identity around being funny. Because
Yeah.
if you would laugh, then you wouldn't see my pain. You wouldn't see, I could also in a way keep lying to myself. And I mean, yes, the buy-in, if you call something a comedy show, you need to be able to deliver and make people laugh, right? There is this unspoken agreement that we've made with the audience. But I love what you're sharing so much because I do think allowing all parts of ourselves as people to present themselves in a way that's smart. It's that, playing at the highest of your intelligence. And that's what I
Mhm.
love about Mike's stuff so much, where it's like, yeah, he's incredibly funny. He probably could have made this whole thing punch, 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 but he does that really well of like inserting those moments where he's kind of setting up the tent, but you don't see it yet, which is exactly what you're saying of like,
Yeah.
oh, what are these moments that I'm just offering it to you? as I always say, like, if you're going to give medicine to a dog, you're not like, here's your medicine. They're never going to take it, right? You got to wrap it in cheese, or you got to, like, you don't want them to know right away. And they're like, oh, I feel better. And it's like, yeah, you did, because I wrapped it in cheese. Like, it's the same thing, I think, sometimes for our audience, because, yeah, nobody wants to feel like they're being not even spoken down to, but it's like, this is what I'm presenting you, like, are you actually a good human?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that in magic too. It's weird. Like, I'm even hesitant to say it's comedy magic, because it is. The show, I think, is more funny than it's like a 50-50 balance now. But it's also tricky too, where if you tell the audience like something to expect, they're going to come in with that expectation, then you got to live up to it. Like, I tried, so I do a bunch of cruise ships, and I created this like new, just quick 45-second teaser video, right, of just like certain things I've done, and like, this is Nick Paul, he's done this and that, and I think I did it for 3 shows, and the audience was so much harder to get on my side. And I think that works for some performers. They're like, hey, look how great I am. But I immediately went back to my self-deprecating intro, which the final line is, he recently won the award for greatest magician in his family. And it's like, it kind of like lets the audience, oh, okay, this guy is self-aware, because that fits my persona, right? You kind of have to fit what works for you. But yeah, it was so noticeably difficult to do those shows, because the audience had this like expectation of, oh, this guy has been on television, he must be fantastic. And like, the second you're not, hitting that, you could feel the energy in the room go down. But I forget why I brought that up.
It's just no. It's just about expectations, and like what the unspoken expectations that we set up with an audience.
There is a story in the book about, and I'm not bringing this up to promote my book. I'm bringing it up because you're one of the few people I think that can experience this. I talk about being a silver living statue person for 4 years at a Detroit casino, and that's how I paid off my student loans. That's one of the stories. And I think I distinctly remember, it was like fall 2011. I'm standing on a box in silver makeup, and I look over, and like SNL's going on, right? And that was the season Aidy got it and Cecily got it. Yeah. And I just remember sitting there going, what the hell am I doing? And like, I feel like you're one of the few people that might be able to relate to that, because I think we have a bunch of Second City friends too that have gone through that journey of seeing people really explode. And we all started together, and I'm not saying they don't deserve it. They're all fantastic.
Sure.
I remember the first time I saw Aidy on TV or on stage with you guys doing a show. I was like, oh, this girl's going to blow up. But there is something that you have to get over as a artist or performer, just to know it's like, well, that's their journey. That's not my journey, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that about Aidy, because I would say there's only 2 people that I've ever performed with. And, you and I have had the luxury of performing with some of the funniest, most talented people in the world. And I remember auditioning for Drop in Science with Aidy. And I still remember the scene that we did, and we were chimney sweeps. And because, she's just like, what, like 5 foot nothing. And she's just like, hello. And I was like, let's ride, where I love doing characters. And I remember it so distinctly, and being like, that person will be famous. And the only other person I've ever felt that about was John Reynolds. Did you ever perform? Remember John?
Yeah, I met him after I left Chicago. I think we all did. I came back and I did a wild card show with you.
Okay.
And I don't know if I was in a scene with him, but it's one of those things like him. And I had just last year, I did a real brief, tiny thing on I Think You Should Leave. They needed Tim lookalikes, and I was on it, and Tim was directing the scene. And I must have looked so unprofessional, because Tim would like go through and like a bit similar to John. You're just like so committed, so funny. And I'm just like watching this as if I'm on my couch watching it on TV, just laughing my ass off. And I'm like, oh, I gotta be in this scene. Yeah, it's like crap.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
he was. When he blew up, I was really happy for John too, because, or just not even. I don't think he's a household name, but he's somebody that is consistently working. But because he's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and it's interesting when you talk about what is other people's journeys. And I look back where I'm like, I was always doing the work, but I still had no idea I think what my point of view was, which I'm like, oh, no wonder I didn't get more scenes in shows at Second City. Like I was probably just writing, being like, I don't know, I know this is funny.
Yeah, same.
And but I didn't have a point of view because that was, from like people pleasing and codependency and, how many more things can she list? But it's true where like I was just like, oh, I was still in this place of like, I want you to like me, versus I feel like a lot of people who found their definition as a performer, whether that was success or otherwise, commercial success very quickly, I think had very, very clear points of view. Because I mean, they're absolutely hilarious, but I can also think of a handful of other people I know who are still working and consistently working, but have not found that sort of success as, commercial success, as I always like to say. Because I'm like, if you can make a living doing this at all, success, huge,
Yeah, I mean,
huge success.
I was on a ship last week and I was mad because they didn't put me in the big fancy theater. They put me in the cabaret space, and it was smaller audiences and it's harder. But it's like, I just have to take a step back. It's like, you're getting paid to do magic tricks in Spain. Shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, yeah, like you wrote a book. Like you got to write, like you wrote a book of all of your experiences around doing the thing that you love to do. And like that alone, I mean, it's also, I think sometimes we put a lot of focus on, and we as a universal, not meaning that you have to have the same opinion as me, but I think often we put a lot of emphasis on the people who have done the things that we haven't done yet, or that we feel like we didn't get to do, versus I have to remember all the people I also did a lot of things with that don't do anything anymore.
Yeah. That's most of my Facebook feed now. Yeah.
Yeah. And
no judgments towards that. I in some ways I respect that. I was like, oh, you got out.
Oh my, well, and that's a whole other conversation, right? Where I'm like, oh, God bless you. I mean, even I would say the effort that it took to trust that moving to Atlanta was the right thing, not only like for my mental health, for my family, et cetera, but really for my career of like, I'm like, I don't know exactly what it is that I'm going to do next, but I know that it's big, and I know I have to give myself the space to be able to like really transform into whatever that thing is. And I'm not going to have that space to do it in Los Angeles, and just having the, I mean, frankly, like the courage to be like, well, I hope this pans out,
I mean, and we kind of did something similar. I mean, we were talking about LA. I forgot to mention we moved up about 30 minutes north to the suburbs, and it's weird. It's now it's like living off campus, and it's actually it's more of a drive. You're always driving 30 minutes into the city, but now it's like I kind of look forward to like, I get to leave LA for a couple of days, and I'll come back, and it's very similar probably to what you did as well. And it's weird because we were in Burbank. And like it really messes with you every day, taking a walk with the dog, seeing the Warner Brothers lot, water tower. You're like, oh, well, I'm not doing that, so clearly I'm a failure. I'm not working there. So it's strange.
It's really strange, but I also think there's also something interesting to where like a lot of folks that we know that are working in like traditional Hollywood right now, it's like also a lot of people aren't working. Everybody's on strike, where it's this interesting thing. And especially, like I said, my husband and I have a production company. So really seeing the way that what kind of things are being bought, where is like money really going? Like so many more people are just putting their specials out on YouTube because they can monetize it and make more money than it used to be like, oh, I have a Netflix special. It's like, yeah, but if Netflix isn't going to pay you as much as you could actually make on YouTube, like to your point where it's like, I'm more interested in personal finance and personal well-being. Like if I'm going to cultivate an audience that's true to Nick Paul, they're going to come and be my audience no matter where I am. Right.
Mm-hmm. And having that creative control too, and not having somebody own the product, that the more that happens, the more you realize it's like, oh, and you see people get screwed over. Like, I mean, going back to like Tim and Sam Richardson, like they had that great show Detroiters, such a great comedy, so funny, and Comedy Central buried it. And it's just like, oh yeah, that can happen even if you have a fantastic show, like when someone else owns your thing. So there's pros and cons to it. You get more eyeballs on it, but at the same time, they could, destroy it if they want to.
Yep. Did you know them from Detroit, or did you meet them later?
I don't know either at all. I met Sam briefly at the castle and had maybe the most awkward interaction with a celebrity. like when you work the Magic Castle, you see celebrities all the time, and there's a few I've gotten to know, and I would call I'm friendly with, and you're just like,
Right.
oh, hey, how's it going? Cool, cool, cool. You keep it cool. But like when I saw him down there, I just had total, fanboy freak out. I'm like, that show, that was a good show, right? That was really, hey, I'm working the castle next week if you want to come see the show. It's like just this really awkward moment. And
Yeah,
they
like,
were really sweet about, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe we'll come. And it was like him and Mike O'Brien. And then Mike O'Brien was mad that I thought he was Tim. I was like, no, I know who you are. I know who you are. I used to see you at Second City. I used to watch you a lot in the back of the room. It
yeah.
was so
And
incredible.
that's always weird, right? When you're like, no, I've been like watching you for years. Yeah. No, it's totally cool. Well, and that's what was always interesting about doing stand up in LA, because you would actually have like legitimate famous people that would drop in on your show. Like you'd be producing a show, or I was like, producing a show in the smaller room at the Improv. And then they always like, you always know somebody will drop in, but you're like, okay, yeah, whatever, and then they're like, hey, Bill's here. And I'm like, and they're like, Bill Burr's going to do 15 minutes before you start. I'm like, yeah, cool. He's only like one of my favorite stand-ups. Like, so that's always just interesting. Yeah. Of like, how do you do that? Like, oh yeah, hey, how are you?
It's weird at Comedy Magic Club too, because most magicians aren't allowed in legit comedy clubs, but Comedy Magic Club was formed in the 70s down in Hermosa Beach, and the owner is just a fan of variety, so they always have a variety act. So I do it a bunch when I'm in town, and yeah, I've like Arsenio Hall's open for me, Paul Reiser, like all these like name drop, and it's weird because like you can share those Facebook photos. You're like, hey, look at this, but at the same time, it's like I'm probably never gonna see them again. But they were nice and cordial and cool. You did that thing. So you have to just look, there's a balance to it all.
Well, and that was always interesting too, of the short amount of TV and movie stuff that I did when I was in LA. And or if you would be on set with like a legitimate famous person and you're like, but I'm also here to work too, like we're just at work. Like having that reframe was always interesting. Okay, so I saw you doing magic then. And then when did you, because do you get like passed, quote unquote, at the Magic Castle, or what is that process like? And for people who might not be familiar with what the Magic Castle is, can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, it's a private club that's been around since the 60s. Actually, the last founder of it just passed away a couple of days ago. He was like 92, 93, I think he made it too. He's a sweet guy. But yeah, it's been around since the 60s, private club. Now it's a little bit more commercial, but you need to know a magician to get in. Dinner, there's like 7 showrooms. I tried to, before I moved to LA, I was like trying to work there for like 5 years, just constantly bugging the booking director. And then when we moved to LA, like a month in, I just said, I'm just gonna go hang out. And a friend of mine got me in. And the second I walked up, the booking director walked out the front door, and I go, hey, I'm Nick. I've been emailing you. He's like, hey, yeah, all right, let's go grab a drink. And, a month later I was booked. It just took that face-to-face contact.
Huh.
But the funny part, I was booked to work there before I became a member. Before my audition. I did the audition and then got passed, but I was already booked. It was like one of those weird timing things. So it was very awkward in the audition process. Like the guy who was running it goes, yeah, and I see one of you is already on the schedule. All right. Like, oh, I wonder who that is. All right, this is weird. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know if I'm gonna be good. But Chris and I just did it a couple weeks ago with a friend of ours in the theater. It's one of those cool places where it's like, I don't do it as much now because it's a lot of shows in a week, and it pays fine, but you make it the same on a cruise ship in a week doing a couple shows versus doing like 25 shows. But it's one of those street cred type things where I try to do it every couple of months just because it's neat that they allow you to be a part of it. And I think it's most people working there are doing good work. Magic is this weird thing where I'm really going through like this kind of crisis with it. I'm just noticing how much magic is just karaoke and how many magicians are just cover bands doing the same material as everybody else, because you can buy a routine and do it verbatim and nobody cares. It's this weird, because like not enough people see magicians in the same way they see musicians or comedians. So you can get away with buying a routine verbatim And I do a lot of routines in my show are like old pieces of magic or things that you can buy, but I've tried so hard to make a conscious effort to either make it original, like going back to your perspective of like trying to, what's my point of view with this, or how do I
Yeah.
make it different? Or how do I just build a trick from the ground up, which I've been trying to do more and more lately. It's hard because Teller has a quote, it's like, being a magician is difficult. It's like being a musician, but once you write the song, you also have to build the instrument to
Mm.
play the song. So that's kind of what a lot of it becomes. But anyway, you asked me about the Magic Castle, and I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
No. I love it. I could listen to it all day long. I find it so fascinating. And there is really cool moments though too about seeing friends succeed and follow their dreams at different levels. Like one of the first times Chris Red was back from, I must have been SNL was on break or something. But anyway, he did a show with like Dana Carvey at I don't know, Improv or Laugh Factory or something, and like getting to like go and support him and like hang out afterwards. And I'm like, dude, this is like incredible. And the same thing I felt when I got to see you at the Magic Castle. And I was like, this is the Magic Castle. Like you made it. You made it, like for all intents and purposes. And I think there's always, right, I think in some ways it's good as performers and artists where we're like, there's always the next thing. We're always challenging ourselves. But I'm also a big proponent of like, but look at everything you've done. Like, not saying that you're not doing that, but I think that's such an important thing to remember, because if we're always looking for somebody who's done a thing that we haven't done yet, you're going to find them.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger of social media too. Even like I literally was sitting on my balcony in a nice cruise ship room, scrolling through Instagram, and be like, "How'd they get that?" And I'm just like,
right,
shut up." Once again, just shut up. You're fine.
Yep.
But it's just in this field. It's the reason you and I and people like us are at our levels is because you're never satisfied. You're trying to get to the next thing. So it's a balance of being grateful. Oh, cool. I did this. I achieved this goal. Now what? Because, it's when a guy I worked with, he'd always say this to me. He's like, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. And it's like, it's hard not to keep that in the back of your mind, because you want to be grateful and you want to be present and live in the moment, which is something I've been doing a lot of work on lately, trying to. It's so difficult for me just to sit still. And I think that's why I travel a lot. That's why I've grown to really love flying, because it forces me to do nothing. It's like, it's the only time where I can really consciously, I'll have my laptop up or do some work, but it's like, no, you have to sit here for 7 hours. Because that's what you got to do. But when you're at home, you're just like, oh, I got to do this. I got to take out the trash. I got to work on this. And it's hard to just kind of be present in those moments. So I was listening to a few of your earlier other podcasts, and I think you were talking about that too. And it's helpful to keep that stuff in mind, because it's very easy to forget those things.
Yeah, and we just I think we're all guilty of it. Or almost like feel enslaved to it some ways, like to our brain and wanting to like create. But I think it's a certain type of sickness that us as performers and creators have. And like, I mean, one of the biggest things for me has been where I'm like, so much of everything I'm doing with this podcast, everything else is in service of like my big goal right now is like, I just want to get back to touring. I want to have an audience that I've built myself that are coming to see me. And, where it's like, I don't have these, I mean, I have some decent credits, but like, I don't have any major credits, right? Where they're like, oh yeah, sure. We'll give you a weekend, headlining. It's such and such. So I was like, great, then I'll build my own audience. And like wanting to be able to tour again. I mean, it's like so much of why thinking back to those wild card shows and why it brings me so much joy is it's like, it was just the joy of being on stage and the joy of like, interacting and having that. Like you were talking about transitioning from a silent show and being like, but then it's just a silent show, and being able to really use your audience and have that back and forth. And I'm like, so much of the shift in my own voice has been, I want to be able to utilize my own gifts that make me happy, like making people laugh and being on stage and having fun. But then I also want to be able to help people with it too.
Yeah.
And so it's like really wanting to get back out there. So I just really identify with that. We're getting ready to go on vacation. And we're going up to my mom's lake house. And I was trying to debate. I'm like, am I going to work? Because it's like, oh, well, I could do this and make clips and then da da da. I'm like, but do you really need to? Do you think that, like, do you really believe that your success, your ultimate success, will happen or not happen because you work while you're on vacation?
Yeah.
You know?
It's hard, yeah, because like that's how we kind of function. It's like, well, I did this, so it's, I gotta work today because I gotta get to the next level. But it's yeah, for us, we don't really get, we do cruise ships, but and like those are our vacations, but it's like we're
Yep.
still working, so it's like, we're kind of now trying to plan a trip to like go to Japan or something. We've been talking about it forever, but it's really hard for me. A, because it's expensive, but B, it's hard to just take. Oh, I'm going to take 2 weeks off,
Yep.
and just because you know how this business is, last minute stuff. Sure, every time Kristen travels with me, she books a VO gig.
Of
Like
course.
she can be here for 3 months, not leave the house, but the second we leave, VO gig books.
Oh, yeah.
The universe is a cruel mistress sometimes. But.
Yeah. It's so much so that, like, that's the only one I've never been able to figure out, because even I have a theatrical agent here, and because of the strikes and everything, and so they're doing like a pizza party hangout, because they're like, well, we're all not like, waiting around for that next big thing. We've got a little bit of time to catch up. We're going to have all the talent over to the office and kind of meet and greet and say hi. And which will be fun, because I kind of got grandfathered into this agent with moving here, which was wonderful. But I'm like, I've never met these people in real life. They were just kind of like, looked at my resume, looked at a reel, and they're like, great, you're one of us now. But what made me think of that? Oh, because she had emailed out. She's like, now is a good time to take that trip. If you've been waiting to take a trip or something, she's like, right now is like the perfect time to do it. But yeah, and I think I think a lot of it is just having the consciousness around it. I think when we're conscious of, we haven't taken a vacation, and here's why we haven't taken a vacation, or, we're living in fear a little bit around this one area of like, oh, if I work less, then I'm going to fall behind, or like, I think just being conscious of it is enough. Where I was like, if I work a little bit on vacation because I want my dreams to come true and I know that they're available to me, I just have to work for them, and like that's the conscious choice, then it's like, okay. But if I'm going to my computer because I'm scared, like, oh, if I don't put out more clips or I don't do this thing, then blank will happen, meaning something bad. It's like, well, that's not the energy that I want to A, put out there, or B, participate in to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really, in like anything, you're just kind of finding that balance. And, for me, it's like, what's my anxiety at today? What's my depression at today? What do I feel like battling?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, I can conquer the world. And then there's other days you're like, I want to quit everything. And what's the point of any of this? I hate it all.
But sometimes that, like, none of this really matters. Like, we're on a rock in the middle of like galaxy upon galaxy, and none of this really matters, is actually like really calms my anxiety sometimes. Like, where it's just like, oh yeah, like the things that I think are so vital today and have to be done, and where it's like, it's gonna be okay. Well, okay, so I have like 2 more questions. One, which is, I'm interested about your relationship to risk, if you've ever thought about having that, because you strike me as very like predictable in a lot of ways, like not in a bad way, but meaning it's like, who you are, this is what you do. Like, it makes sense to me that you're interested in finance, like, slow and steady. We know what we're doing. But the idea, doing comedy at all or any performance already makes us risk takers. Like, to be like, well, we're going to try this thing, but especially with magic of all things, and obviously I know that like you're very well rehearsed and all these things, and all of the tricks of a performer, if something doesn't start to go right, how you, all those things. But do you ever think about it in that way? Like, do you feel like magic or that element of performance provides something for you that feels safe to keep other things in your personal life safe? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was thinking about this recently. It's funny how I was talking about this with a friend. It's weird doing this. You realize that, like, I'll because Kristen helps me from time to time, especially when we're traveling, and I'll just say, "Oh, go do this or that, or tear that down, or fix this problem." And I realize like she'll get confused by it or not know what I mean. And I realize it's because it's not anything she's doing. It's because I've been doing this for 20 years and I've had to learn how to be kind of self-sufficient and be a problem solver. And just, it's just the weird things that come with being a magician. It's just like, okay, I mean, I run all my tech in my show with a remote, and I have to program all that. So I got to set all that up before the show on top of setting up the tricks. And so it's like I forget that those things are just normal. So those little weird problem solving skills that I've acquired over 20 years is something I've recently not been taking for granted. It's just like, oh, it's almost like being on like a little mini film set. You know how when you're on a set and you're just like, how the hell is this going to get done? Then all of a sudden action, everything comes together, and then all right, back to break. And you're just like, it always fascinates me how all of a sudden everybody's in the right spot, cameras, lights, crew, and then okay, going on to the next thing. I was like, how did that happen? Like those are like real magic tricks to me. So it's really just giving yourself, I think, a little bit of a pass sometimes and knowing what your skills are. You know, it's like, okay, I have these things I need to work on, but I'm really good at this, so that's good. So just kind of keeping those things in the back of your mind for when you're getting frustrated or when you feel like all is lost, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. And that's interesting because I always feel that way. I was making a list the other day of like, I am, like an I am list. I am this, I am that. And I was like, oh, I am a director and I am a producer and I am a writer and I am a light person. And I am like, you know, I think sometimes when people are like, God, you and your husband work all the time. I'm like, because we have a full production company that's run by 2 people. And now we have a third, my producer who's sitting on the conversation with us right now. And I'm like, that's it. So I was like, everything that gets made, gets done, gets, you know, you learn how to be. It always reminds me of Bert from Mary Poppins when he's the one man band and like going through the park. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel all of the time. Yeah. But I also think that's so great because, you know, we talk about going to bigger and bigger dreams or knowing what we want, like that ability to be your own Swiss Army knife, I think is so vital because it also keeps you out of things that may seemingly be shiny, but you're like, oh no, they don't have it together. Or they don't know what they're doing because you know all these other elements that do have to come together in order for the magic to happen.
Yeah, it's weird. My bullshit meter is, I think, higher than other people. I have a really tough time if I get just the sense that you're BSing me. I have a tough time trusting you. And that can be in tech or that can be on set somewhere. That can just be in real life. I think that's one of the weird, strange skills you get as a magician is like, you know how to lie to people, but it's never done maliciously. It's like you're holding on to the 3 of clubs, right? Even though I've already swapped the 3 of clubs and it's in my pocket. But like those little white lies that are giving you get a glimmer of magic and wonder, you know, to kind of break through, I know, the chaos of life, just to give you a little bit of excitement, I guess. But at the same time, it's like you can see how people can manipulate other people. And a buddy of mine's writing a book on all of that right now. And it's just, we talk about it all the time. It's fascinating. And so it's weird. Yeah. It's like you have, like you said, I'm a producer, I'm a writer. It's like, it's important to make those lists to remind yourself of like, okay, these are the skills I have. These are the things I know. Cause it's very easy to forget what you're good at and very easy to get bogged down and, you know, depressed about, well, this isn't going my way. This isn't working. And I'm working with a buddy of mine. We're trying to, you might know him, Ryan Zimmerman out of Chicago.
I feel like I know that name.
He was partners with Joey for a long time, and now they're
okay.
Yeah,
no, wait, Ryan Peterson.
Yeah, well, yes, because his
wife's last is Sarah Zimmerman.
Okay, that's why I've been calling him Ryan. I've known him forever. Oh man, can we cut this? Can we get rid of this? He's not going to listen to this, right? I'll make sure he doesn't.
Wait, first of all, that's wild because Ryan has been popping up in my thoughts often because he was actually a pretty good part of my life when I first moved to LA and Joey and I were dating and I was with Ryan all the time. I owe so much of my own I think bravery within like sketch and being like, okay, I can do these things to Ryan, because he was putting me up in his sketch shows long before. Like I was like, I don't know, I'm still doing improv. I don't know if I can do sketch. And he's like, you're hilarious. Trust me, you can do it. That's so funny.
Well,
So
it's
you
funny.
guys have,
He's doing that for me too, because he read the book. He's like, I think this is a TV show, and so
okay.
we're trying to flesh it out into what the pilot is. So the only reason I bring that up is because it's just doubt and worry and trying to remember what your skills are. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. It seems like a daunting task, but I think we can pull that off. But
Okay. Sorry, I just have, this is like so cosmic, and like of course this is happening right now. That's so wild. My whole body has goosebumps, because as you were telling me, I was like, I think I was gonna be like, I don't know if you've ever thought about writing a pilot, but I was like, to me, the idea of this kind of like, you know, depressed magician, like we have to, because you could use the book, I think, as now I'm just like pitching you my idea, but like using the book as reference, but also it's like, what is it like to have this guy who, I love the thing that you said that I was the most attracted to is like, what is it like to lie to people daily, but you're doing it in order to create wonderment for them. Like that dichotomy to me is like, ooh, I was like, that's super fascinating. And like just having this guy who's kind of like, you know, you could have attributes of being you know, based off of like your own personality, but it's like, what is this kind of like guy who's really wanting to present something like pure and wonderful to the world, but somebody who's also like struggling and depressed and kind of going through something. And like that dichotomy of that we feel sometimes, like when we're depressed or having a shitty day or grieving, and it's like, great, now I have to go on stage. And, you know, I remember many moons ago when I just gotten hired to Second City, and a friend of mine had passed away in a very tragic accident in Chicago, and I had to go and perform that night. And I was like, like what? And so just those moments that we have in life where it's like our, you know, the sad clown, like our job is to show up and create wonderment for other people, sometimes at the sacrifice of ourselves. Anyway, that's so fascinating.
That's crazy. He's a good man, but yeah, it's important to have people that, you know, just encourage you. And I think you and I have been lucky in that sense of, it's really not about talent. It's about having people see things in you that you don't really see yourself, or maybe you see but you don't believe in. And I've been fortunate. I try, even on rough days, I try to remember that. It was like I've had, whether it's like my parents or mentors in magic or entertainment, or guys like Ryan, who are, you know, great writers that can see something in you and be like, no, you can do this. Because I think it's really, I see a lot of friends of mine from back home that have, once again, not judging this, but haven't really done anything. And I think it really just comes down to no one held their hand and said, no, you can do this. Like I've had a lot of people that have held my hand and showed me what door to open, you know, and it's, I certainly don't take that for granted. I think you have to, if you're struggling, you know, try to find the people that, you know, I was going through this. My brother was doing stand up in New York for a long time. And I just kept over and over telling him, like, you need to surround yourself with people that are better than you. Like you don't get better with people that are or lower than you, or like you gotta, you know, that's what Seinfeld did on Seinfeld. He hired all writers all actors that were better actors than him. He's like, he knew what he was doing, so he could lift himself up. But, you know, on a very simpler level, you have to do that no matter what, whether it's entertainment or anything. But that's something I've really kind of grown to believe in. So guys like, you know, Ryan and whatnot, you know, I try to be as grateful as I can for people like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that I'm really feeling right now is like, it's finally the time where I'm like, I'm down to fail. Like I was like, I am fully open and ready, and I'm like, let's do it, because I'm like, I'm very proud of my career, and I'm very proud of a lot of the things that I've created, but I'm like, I know for me, I feel like my best is yet to come. And I'm like, and the only way I'm really going to find my way there is by like, not by going in, you know, I'm pitching this thing, I hope you like it, being like, I'm pitching this thing, I really love it, here's why I hope you like it. And being okay to be like, again, it's that rooted point of view. It's that I think that, like, you know, that resiliency, or even I think that's what's so great about your book, you know, of like all of these insane stories of things that have happened to you. And it's like to even be able to be at the place in your career where it's like, I've weathered the storm enough that like now I got to like write a book, that it's like filled with all of my stories, I just think is so exciting. And honestly, any way that I can help with your script, let me know. I would absolutely, I'm like, I was so, as you were sharing, I'm like, this is a TV show. And I'm like, I wonder if he writes, or you're like, tell me about it. And so I love
I'll
that you
definitely
have.
send you. I'm going on a ship in a week by myself, and I'm just going to sit down and just force myself to write. And it's funny how all those weird Second City skills come in. Like I just kind of I started just fleshing out what the pilot was, and I was like, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to start improvising scenes. And it's funny, some stuff started coming out, and it's not great. It's not. It has a long way to go, certainly,
Yeah.
but it's wild how if you just sit down and do the thing, it happens. And that's how the book came along, is like, well, I just got to sit down and do it, and whatever happens.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, well, and that's what I say all the time. I'm like, just do the thing. People come to me all the time and they're, it's, oh, well, I got to do this. I'm like, have you started? And they're like, well, no. Cause I'm like, just do it. You have to just do the thing. And also trusting that like most of the time, like no one's paying attention. No, like,
Yeah. I think that's why I get frustrated with the magic phones, because it's so easy to do the thing now, especially like for somebody like me who spent a lot of time at high school learning how to shoot videos and edit videos. And now it's like, you can just do it. And that's a good and bad thing. It's like, because now the market is, same with comedians and even magic too. It's like so oversaturated, right? So it's like, how do you break through? But at the same time, you have no excuse to not, write your own damn book. It's like, it's so easy to do things these days, but it does mean there's more people in the market. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think I find solace in that, because I feel like it used to be, right? Even like, what was that? When you're talking about being the silver statue, what year was that? Like 2012?
I did that from, I want to say 2010 to 2012-ish.
So
like
it was around there, because I was touring. I remember because I took Cecily's place on Greencoat when she went to SNL.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was around that time. And but just meaning where it was like, that wasn't that long ago, but even the way that like we would kind of get plucked out of obscurity, and it's like, great, now you have a career, like that almost doesn't even exist anymore, because
Sure.
now it is a creator's economy. And so in some ways it's frustrating for folks like you and I, where it's like, well, we've been doing this and ironing these skills for years. And now everybody, some idiot with an iPhone can be like, I'm this thing. And it's like, no, you're not. But I always say where it's like, I think cream rises to the top. And when we're consistent, we're putting out consistent stuff, I think people can tell the difference. And I think it is still like that. What is your point of view and all that stuff that, yeah, I mean, now you have the ability to make a book, or write a book, you have the ability to, like do like, I'll be able to like tour again in a year, like a legitimate sold out tour. Like that wouldn't have been available to me a couple of years ago. Like you would have had to have been plucked out in some way. So I think that's kind of the other side of it. Well, plug your book for me beautifully one more time. Shameless plug. I want everyone. I'm so excited to get. Well, that's where I was like, I can't like get my copy and then ship it to you and be like, can you sign it and then ship it back
I'm gonna
to
send
me?
you. I'll send you. I just need, send me your address. I'll send you a signed copy.
Please, I would love that.
It was it's always a pleasure to see. I'm sad you're not in LA anymore, that we don't get to run into each other, but I'm also, I'm happy. It seems like you and your husband are really doing some great things, and I know I'm excited for, what continues down there, because I definitely see you like, I think you're gonna start being able to do these tours of, because it seems like you already have this great fan base, and that's what you need these days. These people that really support you. And I know I have like certain podcasts that I've listened to forever that was like, oh, they're doing a show, great. Just because you feel like you have a connection with these people. So it's almost so much better than just having a one-off Netflix special that people see and forget about you. So I think you're certainly doing the right thing. And it's,
Oh,
I mean,
thanks.
you're already making stuff happen. Now it's just like, okay, what's the next level, which is awesome. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's I think it is that sense of longevity that I realized I was looking for. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to find it other places. And I think the scariest thing, like when you were talking about, I know I'm like, I'm going to wrap it up. Here we go.
No, you're fine. I don't have a
But
dentist until for 30 minutes. So.
the just quickly saying when you were talking about, and then you got a call back for Blue Man, you're like, I don't really know if I want this anymore. And I think that's what was really scary for me, where I was like, just aimlessly auditioning for like co-star roles. I was like, I have to be completely open. My schedule has to be completely open to this thing. And I was like, this is not my number one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, still one of my biggest goals is like, I want to create television. I mean, I still want to do that. I'm still writing. I'm still pitching. Like that is a thing that I know is in the future. I'm just not there yet. But it's like, where I was like, the thing that I love more than anything is stage performance. I'm like, that's always been the thing that I love. And it's not as glamorous as like, oh, they won an Emmy for this thing and I knew them. And now, oh my God, they won another Emmy. And I was like, but if I'm doing something because other people will think it's cool, first of all, that's not even to say that all of those things would happen. Let me back up. But meaning like if I'm in pursuit of what everybody else is doing because we started together and I'm like, oh, that's the thing I think I'm supposed to do. I'm like, then I could even end up getting the thing. And then I sacrificed all these other things in my life in order to get the shiny thing and then be like, well, I don't even want this thing to begin with. So I just really appreciate you sharing that story because it's just such a good reminder where, you know, this place that I'm in where I'm like, okay, dreams have slightly shifted, but it's still kind of all the same. It's still performing. It's still entertainment. It's still all those things, but kind of making your own way. And so I just want to honor that for you too, that I'm always just so impressed. And, you know, when we talk about being on our phones and being like, oh, that person got this thing or this person got that thing, like you're one of those people where I'm like, Nick Paul's still doing it. I can still do it. You know, like that. It is seriously though, in the best way of like, you know, you've made all of these amazing opportunities for yourself and you get to work with your wife and you get to travel and you get, you know, it's like the doing it for the love of the game and also just being really good at it. I mean, that's the other thing where it's like, there are some people I see that are still doing certain things. I'm like, it might be time to throw it in, but you know, yeah, I'm just always so impressed with your stamina and endurance and, the lightness that you bring to your work, but also matching it with the intensity of P's and Q's, meaning like I control the show with this remote and I'm making sure like, I think having both of those things is so valuable of not taking the art too seriously, but also taking it so seriously, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I really sometimes struggle with magic, like I said, going back to the karaoke cover band thing. But the great thing about magic is it still like is a live medium, you know, even with other things. Like you can watch comedy on TV, you can watch music, obviously not the same thing, but magic really still gets scrutinized. The second I worked on a Netflix show called Magic for Humans, my buddy Justin hosted. I worked just behind the scenes helping out with stuff. And it was funny just seeing all the comments of like, well, it's green screen, well, it's camera trick. And just like, it's like, well, all right, we worked really hard on that, but sure, whatever you want to believe. But that's the beauty of doing magic live. It's like, if, you know, I take a phone and I vanish it and it's gone, like you were right there. You didn't see me do anything. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And like so much of what I do is like the magic is kind of secondary. I'm trying to really kind of going back to what we were talking about of just what's my point of view, what's my perspective, what's the story here. Okay, also I'm going to make a phone vanish. Great. Like, so it's like, oh yeah, he's a magician too. That's kind of what the goal going forward is.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's nice to have these things similar to stand up or, you know, like how magic is, it just works best when you see it live. So it's those are the things that kind of I think probably keep both of us going. It was like, yeah, okay, being on stage is first and foremost, you know, the important thing. You know, the other stuff, it's great to have, you know, that secondary income. It's nice to get, I mean, I got like $80 from Amazon this month from my book. I was like, oh, cool. Money from something I did a while ago. Great.
Yep.
But so it's nice to have those like other forms of income. But at the end of the day, you know, getting up on stage and feeling an audience's energy is like, there's nothing like it, you know? And I think that's probably what we're addicted to.
Oh, for sure. That's the thing I chase. That's why now I dictate taking on any new project or creating something where I'm like, if it's something that really takes time, not like consulting on something, but if it's something I want to create, I'm like, is this in service of being able to get me to being on stage? Because that's ultimately the big goal, where I'm like, podcast is great. I get to share my point of view. I get to talk to amazing people, learn from other people, and then it's something that kind of lives forever, but also it's kind of building this audience and, with the various other things that I'm still doing as well. But it's like, yeah, there's nothing greater, I think, than I was just making a video about that today where I was like, to me, like laughter is spiritual and not mean, or it's like, we don't have to overwork it, but meaning where it's like eliciting a laugh is you going, I understand what you're saying. It's an immediate buy-in of, oh, I understand that thing. And I was like, and that doesn't happen for us anymore in a way that's not like memes, right? Like we're all like sending each other memes back and forth. And there's room for that, but meaning like a well-crafted joke or someone sharing something. I always say like the universal truths are hidden in the specificities of our lives. And it's like being able to share that in a way that elicits an emotional reaction. And I just think it's so cool of magic being one of those ways to utilize it. And I also think it's my last pitch to you to make this television show. And I feel like it's an amazing vehicle for you because there's nothing like that we're seeing right now. Within that world, there is a huge market and world for it. I think there's the ability to make it something that's like very funny, but also very dark. And I think that, there's there kind of those two worlds of like magic is an illusion. And the idea in a lot of ways of like, there's also a lot of things in life that are an illusion. And like how I think you get to play with a lot of really cool stuff. So please, I would be so proud if you send me whatever it is you're working on. And I would love to be able to help you in any way. But this has been such just a blessing and a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So thank you so much for like giving me your time. I know it's super valuable and it was so great to connect with you. And if I've not expressed it before, I'm always in your corner. So anyway, if there's ever something you're like, hey, can you shout this out or can you do this? Or, hey, do you know this person? Do you know anybody in Atlanta? Anyway, that I can be of service to the world knowing Nick Paul, please let me know. Or if you ever just want to do a show again where people throw money at us,
I hope so. I hope once your fan base hears that, they're like, please book that show right now. And then you give everybody $1 bill and they have to come up on stage behind us, not in front of us, behind us, above us, and drop it on us. Because that was the icing on the cake. We weren't standing up. We were sitting down for the show that nobody showed up to. But the owner, I think, dropped, I don't know, it was like $21 bills or something on it. And I think there's photo proof of this, which is great.
Yeah. And no one showed up. Oh, that's just no one. You're right. No one was there. It was so painstaking. Nick Paul, tell us where we can find you, where we can buy your book, all of that good stuff before I let you go.
Everything's on nickpaulmagic.com or I'm on the Instagrams at realnickpaul.
Awesome. And tell us the full title of your book one more time.
Oh, it's called Magically Introverted. You can find it on the Amazons, Audible, Apple Books, or if you want a signed copy, nickpaulmagic.com.
Hey, there it is. All right, friends. Thank you so much for joining us on this like magical conversation. This has been so much fun. And as always, tune out, tune in, love you, mean it.
Bye.
We did it. Thank you so much. That was so fun.